Good afternoon. My name is Nia Smith. I am in the International Marketing class. Today I will be discussing Chapter 4, which talks about cultural dynamics in assessing the global market. We will have 5 objectives today. The first one will be talking about the importance of culture to an international marketer. The second one will be the origins of culture. The third one would be the elements of culture. The fourth one would be the impact of cultural borrowing. And the fourth one would be the strategy of planning or of the strategy of plan change and its consequences. So, jumping right into it, what an international marketer must keep in mind and what they must know is very important is that they use recognizable symbols and cultural norms to the target market that they're looking to go towards. It must be culturally accepted before they jump on the bandwagon of what you're trying to advertise to them. Honestly, you can't just like come over to America and you're trying to sell your clothing, but it's like monkey fur. It may be prevalent in the country that they're in, but it's not something that we would use. It's not something that we, how do you say, conform to. Perfect example of like the food that we eat, like in Asian restaurants, they're known for basically, eating domestic animals. That's not something that we do over here in America. So if you're going to bring your business over here from over there, starting from that traditional norm, you would have to kind of conform the things that you have to conform to the new culture that you're entering. Culture is basically like the sum of knowledge, beliefs, rituals, morals, laws, customs, habits that people acquire amongst a society. There's like a three-way interaction of what an international must keep in mind when entering an international market. They have to understand the economic conditions. You have to understand the economic conditions of a particular group of people, so you know how to market your products, how to price your products, and what products you need to market over there. And also, they need to keep in mind of their efforts towards entering this new country. You have to understand what these people are going through and what you need to do as far as the government or as far as taxes that are imposed on foreigners, because we would be considered the foreigner if we're entering an international market. So we have to put a lot of effort in our research about this market. It's important that we put a lot of effort towards knowing the market that we're going to enter. Like there's a lot of elements to culture. So you would have to make sure that you understand what those are. Like just making sure that you establish these things before you enter that new market. And like the use of like something new begins, a new culture. And so it begins in like a new culture change. So it's up to the marketer if they want to change that culture. Here in America, we've done that a lot. We have changed a lot of cultures in a positive way to get them more technological advanced as we are. We introduced mobile phones to some countries, and of course they didn't have it at first, but they see the great use for it. They see the connection that it brings them to, and that is a culture change. That's a cultural change, because places that don't have good communication, or you would have to walk to the person's house that you want to talk to, they don't have to do that any longer. And it was solely off of the marketer's choice to bring this new technology to their country. Culture has a persuasive impact. It has a persuasive impact on our entire life every day. Every single day. our culture influences the things that we do, how we think, and why we think this way. Like as countries move from like agricultural to industrial to service economies, one thing in culture that changes is the birth rate. Because agriculture, of course, that's farming and, domesticated things as far as outside and providing a living from your environment was solely put on the man. So, and for the woman, they're in the house. Of course, they're just taking care of the home front and creating more lives. Because they don't have any other responsibility except for the home front. Then when we travel into the industrial, of course, you have some women that ventured into this work industry, but then majority of them, it was a lot of hard work. You had the railroads, you had these factories, it's long hours of work. Of course, you have children, so you need to stay at home and take care of them. And it's not as easy for you to get into this industry. But when we move to service economies, that is when you see, women partaking more into this type of field because, it's something that is easy for us. We get to talk to people and it's something that we want to do. And we feel as if we are very capable of, accomplishing these things for these companies. So why not join the workforce? And as more women join the workforce, of course, the birth rates decreased because they didn't have time to sit at home and produce children. Not saying that women that are in the industry now don't, have babies and have families, but it isn't as advocated as it was back then. And that is solely because women have joined the workforce. Looking in the book on Exhibit 4.1, it shows the birth rate fluctuations, of people. And in Singapore, between the years of 1976 and 1988, it spiked. The birth rate spiked because during this time, being born under the dragon sign was a sign of good luck. So, of course, you would want to have all of your children, during this time because you want that good luck. You want the good luck for your children. And that's in Singapore and Taiwan. In 1966, 20% of the birth rate in Japan decreased. Because during that time, or during that year, being born under the year of the fire horse it signifies bad luck. The woman is known to, kill her husband, and it's just not anything good for the woman and her child. So that's why that birth rate deflected and, decreased because of their culture value towards life and towards their rituals, like that is a part of their calendar. That is a part of their cultural rituals. So they follow that. It's kind of like how we follow astrology, that's just something that they follow as well. And it really does influence things that we do in our day-to-day life. Something as simple as I guess you would say like a dragon year or the astrological sign that people are born under. They tend not to want to create any more lives because they don't want to have that pain or that bad luck. So, but consumption of different types of foods even influence our culture. Like for the Swiss, chocolate is something that they love, and they have the best Swiss chocolate. If you ever tasted Swiss chocolate, it's superb. So it's associated with Swiss people. Nestle is a Switzerland company. They have great chocolate, so it's just more so associated with them. Seafood is more associated with Asian cultures or Asian countries because of where they are. They are more prone to eat fish and seafood and rice and lightweight type of food because of their environment, because where they are. Wines, vineyards, are associated with the French. And even like pasta. When you think of pasta, automatically think Italian. So it really does, like, our foods really do influence our culture. And like, even for me, I'm an African, I'm Liberian, but to say the least, I'm African. And Africans tend to eat a lot of meat, and we also like to use the plants and make that into a paste. Or we use the oil from plants and different foods to create like a paste for food that we like. For example, cassava leaf is, of course, from a cassava, and it's the leaf that we use, and we grind the leaf up and we put it with an oil, and then we also put meat and all different type of great food into it, and it is a delicacy in Liberia, cassava leaf. And when you look at foods like that, you kind of associate them with Africans or people from the islands or something. So I can definitely understand like why they would say like our food consumption influences our culture. Like hamburgers. Hamburger is like associated with America. Even though pizza isn't, that's more so like Italian, but like hamburgers and like fast food and stuff, that is more so associated with the American lifestyle, the mere American culture. Diseases are even influenced by cultures. Like stomach cancer is very prevalent in Japan. And that is mostly because, they eat a lot of salty foods. They eat a lot of foods, that come from unsanitary conditions. So it leads to other things in their bodies that their body can't take, Like even in America, diabetes is very prevalent here. Very, very prevalent. That's more so associated with the foods that we eat as well. The high fatty foods, the sugary foods, the high sugar intake that we take, the high starchy and all the carbohydrates that we put into our body is associated with diabetes. And America has a high rate of diabetes. So I can definitely understand when they say, disease is associated with the culture. Now, there are like 3 definitions of culture. I stated the first one, which is basically the sum of values, beliefs, symbols, ritual that people learn, and it's shared by that group of people, and then it's transmitted through each generation. So it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. But Hofstede also has his own definition of what culture is, and he says that it's like a software of the mind, like a problem solving tool. And I look at that as basically just saying that our culture programs us at like a foundation, kind of. It programs us to think in a certain way. It's something that it's like a foundation for us. Like it helps us in our way of thinking. The third definition came from Hall, and he says that culture is an invisible barrier, a completely different way of organizing life, of thinking, and of conceiving the underlying assumption about family and the state of the economic system, and even man himself. And I look at that, and I looked at the invisible barrier part of that, and what I took from that was basically like one of our culture norms in America. We are told, or we know, to take our hats off when we walk into a building. That is like an invisible barrier. That's like an unwritten rule that everybody follows just due to respect. You want people in the building to to see who you are, because you're coming in there for some reason, of course. But you want to show respect to them, and you don't want them to feel as if they're talking to a stranger, to say the least. So I understand where he says, like, it's an invisible barrier, because all cultures have their unwritten rules that everybody follows. It's just a culture thing. So I can definitely relate or understand what he means by that. Cultures like origins from geography, history, technology, political economy, social institutions, our peers, and then we also have like elements of culture. But one of the origins of culture is geography. And geography, of course, includes like the climate, the topography, the how would you say, like the microbiology of things, and like the influence that it has on our social institutions. And Diamond Jarrett stated that historically, innovation spread faster east to west than north to south. And when he says that, meaning that our world changes, or the advances in our world changes in a horizontal manner. So it starts on one side and it makes its way across. It doesn't start this way on one side and go down and then go up and then go across. No, it starts this way on one side and makes its way across. For example, we could say that, America is fairly young, one of the youngest countries, and that this like civilization started in Africa. So from the civilization there, of course, the land was split. Things happened, and other continents were created. So from that one country on the east, it got more east. It went further east. Then it came around to the west. It went from Africa to Asia to Europe, then down to America. So that is a great example of our advances right now. But I can actually say that I feel that, it's since America is young, but we are highly innovative in our technology, that it kind of, goes west to east now. Because we've started a lot of norms for people and for different cultures. So I do feel that within these 240 some odd years that we were here, it kind of, starts with us now. It kind of starts with us, and we innovate as we travel to the east. We innovate. We take the things that we have learned, and we try to expand the knowledge of the people further east, so that they can be caught up with what we're doing. History also impacts culture. Specific events in history can be seen reflected in technology, social institutions, culture values, and even the consumer behavior. Like, for example, military conflicts in the East have really like, I guess, influence American countries when traveling over there. Like, as far as like Coca-Cola, they couldn't just go over there and want to start branding their things over there, just saying that they're Coca-Cola. Since, in the Middle East is more in Islamic states, you kind of want to incorporate their religious beliefs and their religious values in the products that they are going to be using from you. I know, like, they have a brand called Mecca Cola, and Mecca is basically where people who follow the Islamic faith, they travel to get that spiritual cleansing. It is, once you reach Mecca, that is basically, you have reached the highest part in your deen of the religion that you're following. You're very, very, very spiritual people. And, Mecca is a holy ground, a holy ground. So for Coca-Cola to incorporate Mecca in their advertising, it was very smart on them, because they knew that people would gravitate towards it because it's something that they're familiar with. You don't want to impose you don't want to impose your culture norms on another culture without even accepting what their culture already is, So that is how history, influences our international marketing. The political economy. For like in the 20th century, there were like three approaches to the governance that people competed for world dominance, like fascism. But fascism quickly ended in 1945. Communism, even that trickled down and ended, or slightly ended, in 1990. Now, of course, there are still some communist states, but that has definitely decreased. And in, like, America, we have a democracy and free enterprise. And that is something that has won over us. It has won over the people. Having a free speech, or having the right to freely express yourself, is something that our culture stands firmly on. And it is something that we pride ourselves on. And that's something that is really, really big in our culture. So, it's something that I feel all cultures should try to embody, instead of trying to run their people in one way. But then again, you can't really, you can't blame them for their way of thinking. Technology also influences culture. And, like, technological innovations influence culture values, as far as, like, aircraft, air conditioning, computers, TV. They all have an influence on our culture. And one of the biggest influence that the book states is the biggest technological influence that the book states is the creation and the introduction of birth control. And that was a big technological advance, because it prevented childbirth. And it also gave women a chance to enter the work industry. Like, I feel that birth control is something that was created for population control, in a sense. But I do see how it is looked at as like a technological innovation, because it is something that doctors are prescribing now for people, and it's something that it allows a group of people to join, industries without having the worry of creating families while they're there. Because some people or some jobs tend to let people go when they have other obligations, as far as their family. So that was like a big technological advance. And in our culture, we definitely support that technology advance. Definitely. Now, there are social institutions that we have as well. And those social institutions basically are like the position of men and women, views, of different, or it's like the position of men and women in different societies and how they view their positions in that society. It's, like family behaviors are like more like it's more marketable, and that's one of the social institutions. School and education is another social institution that international marketers take into consideration. The media that is used, corporations, government policies, religious values and systems, they are all incorporated in, the origins of culture. But family behavior is like, it varies across the world. We have extended families living with our mom and dad. We have just a mom and dad household. We also have a single parent household. So it really like it changes. It changes across the world. Religious value systems differ across the world as well. Like for family, nepotism is seen as as favoritism in America, but nepotism is actually practiced in a lot of countries, especially in the Middle East and especially in Asian countries, because they like to keep things within the family and when running their businesses. In the Chinese and Mexican organizations, they run things within their families. It is just something that is just something that is like accepted. Like people in Cairo, they like buy an apartment and fill it with their families. And they buy an apartment building and fill it with their families and their extended families. And this is just something that they do because they want to take care of the people that they are with. In America, our family, dynamic, we're taught to be one and, to value family, but we're also taught that individualism, being yourself, staying true to yourself when it comes to family or, how you interact with people, and being your best and only your best, the best. That's something that we're taught at birth. Coming first is the best, I would say that, religion, it influenced the way of thinking, the outlooks on life, what we buy, for example, like in Islam, 1 billion flowers around the world, Islam has 1 billion followers around the world, but multinational companies, sometimes offend these Islamic states or these people that follow this this norm, because they don't incorporate, like, their religious holidays. Well, now they do. Of course, they incorporate, religious holidays as far as time off and things of that nature that pertain to people's religions, and they are very flexible when it comes to that. But at first they didn't respect religion in a sense of other people, because they were so ethnocentric in their own beliefs that, everybody else would have to conform to them. And going further, you would have to know that you have to conform to the standards of others when you want to enter an international market. As far as school, the literacy rate of a country is very, very important, because you need to know if these people can read or not. If they cannot read, how will you properly and effectively promote your products when they don't have a high literacy rate? It's easier to communicate with people when they have a higher literacy rate. You don't have to kind of dumb it down, and they understand it more. Like with countries with lower literacy rates, you would have to definitely strategize, and you would have to use more symbols than anything to come across to the people of this country, instead of using their language, or their language and their writing to further explain what we're trying to advertise. The media now, it replaces family time. It influences our way of thinking. Like in America, the media influences our culture, and nobody can say that the media doesn't. There was a time where we didn't have all this media coverage, and but now it is increased. It just, I don't know why, but it has increased. And it may be because of the time that we spend in school, and then we have all this leisure time. In America, we only spend 180 days in school. In Chinese or in Asian countries, they spend 240 or more days in school. There's only 365 days in a year. So therefore, if we are only spending half of that time in school, then of course we're going to be heavily influenced by other outlets. And the media, because we have such high technological advances in our culture, definitely influences us at an alarming rate. But then, what has changed in the Asian cultures is that they feel that too much school creates a narrow mind, and they don't have, another way of thinking, because they're solely in the books. But in America, we feel as if too much media and leisure time, it takes away from our mind, and it gets us brainwashed into only believing and thinking and feeling as if we know what we know because of what we see on the media, instead of expanding our mind into a way of thinking, or not a way of thinking, but a process of thinking, meaning that you can't just believe everything that you see out there. You can't just, follow the norm. You kind of have to know what it is that you're believing and why you're believing it. But that is how, media influences our culture as well. So there are also elements of culture. Now, the elements of culture are like our culture values, rituals, symbols, beliefs, and thought process. Now, Hofstede, like our cultural values, like Hofstede stated that there are like 4 primary dimensions of cultures. You have the individual slash collective index, you got the power distance, and you have uncertainty avoidance index, and then you also have masculinity and feminism or femininity index. And the individual collective index or IDV focuses on self-orientation. And countries with high IDV, i.e. America, they have a lot of, they focus more so on competition. Then the power distance index or the PDI focuses on authority orientation. Cultures such as Asian cultures, they are very authoritative people, or hierarchical people, and they respect the leader, and then the respect level goes down as the hierarchical level goes down. And the uncertainty avoidance index or UAI focuses on risk orientation. And again, a lot of Asian cultures are very associated with, not taking those high risk. But then you also have the cultures such as America and German cultures that basically we love taking risk, because we feel like the higher the risk, the higher the return. So when you have countries that don't focus on that, they like to play it safe. And sometimes you can't really play it safe, especially if you want to create a new culture change. You kind of have to take that risk. So I know it can be hard for international marketers sometimes, but it is worth it because you don't know. And that's the biggest thing about it. You really don't know if it's going to work or not. And then, of course, you have the masculinity and femininity index, or the MAS, which basically focuses on assertiveness and achievement. And we are a big culture that focuses on masculinity and femininity. We associate everything with if it's for a man or if it's for a woman. We are highly, highly focused on achievement and being assertive. And I feel that the United States has a very high MAS, very, very high MAS. And you can just see that in our workforce. You can see that in our politics as well. But I know that really does, influences our culture and how we think as a people. Rituals and symbols are basically like patterns and behaviors and interactions that are learned and repeated on a daily basis. And they also vary from country to country. For example, like the book gave an example of a ritual in like Spain and Greece is that they have like extended lunch hours. Extended lunch hours, not just 30 minutes to an hour, probably like 2 or 3 hours. And that is just one of their cultural norms. That's something that they do. Here, one of our rituals is standing up once the national anthem is being sung. That is a ritual of ours. That is something that the American people do all of the time. When you do see the ones that sit down or don't, place their right hand over their heart, it is something that is looked at like, oh, you're not patriot. You don't have any patriotism, because it's one of our rituals that we do. Languages and symbols definitely influence our culture. And like as far as symbols, like the Asian culture, like I would say Chinese. I would say the Chinese people, they have like bright red and yellow colors, and that is something that in like a in an Asian restaurant you would see that type of things, because those, those embody like strength. In Japanese cultures, those are more subtle people, and in like Japanese restaurants they'll have like subtle colors, like earthy colors, light blues and light greens, and the lavenders, and just something that is really subtle, because in their countries they are subtle and peaceful people. So you would more associate that type of feel and colors, just a simple color, with the Japanese. And in the American culture, like our symbols, for instance, a symbol in America, we could our traffic signs. Those are symbols that are mostly found in like America. The man and women sign on the bathroom. Those are symbols that we use frequently here to kind of like not dictate, but kind of show the meaning of things. And it really does influence our culture. In Canada, language has been the focus of political disputes. The differences in language, vocabulary, like varies widely. The difference in language and vocabulary varies in America. So I can't even imagine how it's different all around the world. In the South, we have more of a country undertone, in our the folk language that they've used down here is highly influenced in how people talk. Up north, they have more of, I guess you could say, they pronounce their word, or they pronounce their words in all, like in like full. They don't cut the words off like how they would do in the South. On the West, they use slang terms that mean the same thing as they just use slang terms. And different verbiage to communicate with each other over there. It's very different. And you can see that when you travel across the United States. And even like from like, we were colonized from Britain, of course, or from the British. People in our English, we use the language of English, and we aren't English people. The words that we use are totally different than the words that the English people use, like bathroom. They don't say bathroom, they say, or go to the tub, or the shower. Elevator is called lift. The trunk of your car is called the boot. The vacuums that we use, those are called hoovers. And even though they have Hoover vacuums, we use just vacuum. We say vacuum instead of saying the Hoover. So, just in a short sense of that, we are associated with each other, but we use totally different words, and they mean totally different things. The people, like we are also like our thought process is something that we it varies across the country, across countries as well, and across the world. Like consumer impatience how different cultures make decisions. Like I stated earlier, you know, Asians are more slower in their decision making processes than Western influences or Western cultures. We're faster in our decision making process. For example, when Volkswagen and Suzuki wanted to merge with each other, one of their problems was that, you know, Volkswagen is a German made company and Suzuki is Japanese. And when they would meet for their meetings and for their discussions and strategy implementation for what they're trying to do next, the Japanese would take a little longer in their thinking process. So that forced the Germans, for Volkswagen to kind of make decisions on their own, because they did not want to continuously wait and potentially have somebody else enter the market. So that is just, you know, an example of, you know, how cultures influences thinking process, you know. Being culture sensitive and tolerant is very, 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 very important for an international marketer, because you have to be familiar. Like, culture sensitivity is just being familiar with their norms and nuances. You know, a new culture can be viewed objectively. You know, it can be evaluated, and it also needs to be appreciated, especially if you want to, you know, join this culture as far as you wanting them to patronize your business. You have to accept what they have to offer. You cannot be in an ethnocentric type of mind when expanding internationally. It won't work. It just will not work. It can be acquired by, of course, you know, knowing the different meanings of different colors, knowing the different taste, and of course, just knowing the basic culture facts about the culture. If I were to go to India right now and wanting to create a soft drink like Coca-Cola, most Coca-Cola products, because Indians like spicier food, that in that culture they have a lot of spicy food, their Coke over there is spicy. Believe it or not. It's spicy because that is what their taste buds have gravitated towards, because of their culture influence and their origin and their geographical location. They like spicy foods. They like spices. There are a lot of spices there in that country, so they incorporate it with their meals, with everything. So if you were to go over there and you want to have a product that people have to taste, you want to acclimate it to be spicy. You don't want it to be sweet or savory or anything like that, because that's not what their taste buds are used to. But yeah, of course, you just need to learn more about the environment that you are about to be in. You have to know the degrees of insight that you have to that you must incorporate in your advertising in an international market, because those people can be resistant to change. Very, very, very resistant to change. You know, even though most cultures or some cultures embrace that change, some people are resistant to that change. And I say that to say, just like for example, Liberia. Liberia was formed by the slaves that had gone back over there from coming to America. And of course, when you take someone out of their natural habitat and their natural culture, they're going to want to conform back to what they're not going to want to conform to what, you know, you're trying to impose on them. So that is why a lot of the slaves had gone back to their country, or to their continent, to their former land of Africa. And they started this land of Liberia because they were resistant to the change that the English and the European settlers were trying to impose on them. And, you know, the lack of acceptance can can do things as such and create another country because they don't want to be separated from their lives, their normal lives, their traditional lives, you know. And you can only respect it. And I say you can only respect it because that means you didn't effectively market or effectively incorporate their culture norms into your marketing strategy. Like in Saudi Arabia, women working isn't something that they promote over there. So if we were to go, like if there were to be, let's say something as simple as like a hair salon. If you wanted an all-female staff, you could not do that because it's looked down upon in that country, in the Saudi Arabian culture. Women working isn't something that they promote. So they would be really resistant to that change. Very resistant to that change. Regardless if it brought economy to that country, they'd just be resistant to it because they're not used to having their women in the workforce. So, in the end, it is important for an international marketer to fully evaluate the country that they're in. And when I say fully evaluate, you have to understand where you're going, the culture that you will be impacting, the people that you will be influencing, the outlets that you're going to influence these people on, what you use as far as your symbols, as far as your language. You all have to take that into consideration when traveling to a new market. It's important, very important. We may want to just incorporate our culture norms because it's easiest for us, but it isn't fair for another country to only have your set of values instilled in their way of life. So when wanting to expand internationally, make sure you go in depth with your research of that country so that your business can do well. And I thank you all for taking this time out to listen to me and my understanding of chapter 4. I hope you have a better understanding of, the elements that go into, diverse cultures and when wanting to expand. You all have a great night and thank you again.